You know, there are some stories that are just everywhere. And the Tower of Babel is definitely one of them. We all know it as this classic cautionary tale about flying too close to the sun. But what if the story we think we know is really just scratching the surface? I mean, on the face of it, it's pretty simple, right? All of humanity gets together, they get ambitious, they reach for the heavens, and then bam, they get put back in their place, scattered and confused. It's a foundational myth for our divided world, a story about big dreams and even bigger consequences.
But hang on, what if there's more going on here? What if this isn't just a myth, but a kind of cultural memory? A story rooted in real history with actual physical evidence we can still see today? What if it's also a story about
This incredible artifact? It's called the Tower of Babylon Stele, and it is a direct, physical link to the world that sparked the legend. This is where myth and history literally collide. So let's dive into that collision, and we'll start with the story itself. Okay, first things first, let's do a quick refresh on the story as it's told in the book of Genesis, because the world it describes right after the Great Flood was a very, very different place.
So, picture this. Genesis tells us there was a time when all of humanity was in one place, one people, living together and, this is key, speaking a single language. Now, that kind of unity gives you a ton of confidence, so they decided to channel all that collective power into a massive project. Build a city, and in it, a tower so tall it would reach the heavens. Their goal was clear. 1, make a name for ourselves, and 2, create a central anchor to stop themselves from spreading out and scattering across the world.
And this line from the text, it gets right to the heart of it. This is all about building a monument to their own power, their own unity, and defying the natural order of things, which was to disperse. They wanted to build a permanent fortress against ever being divided.
But, you know, a story this epic about a sky-high tower just begs the question, is any of it true? So let's shift gears from the myth to the hard evidence and see what archaeology has to say. This is the big one, the question that historians and archaeologists have been obsessed with for centuries. Was the Tower of Babel an actual physical place? And the answer, which is pretty mind-blowing, seems to be, yeah, it was.
Everybody, meet the Atemenanki. It was a colossal ziggurat, a stepped pyramid, dedicated to the god Marduk in the ancient, legendary city of Babylon. Today, all that's left are these foundations in modern-day Iraq. But most scholars are convinced that this is the structure that inspired the story. Just imagine the ancient Hebrews, exiled in Babylon, seeing this thing for the first time. It must have looked like it was literally scraping the clouds.
And here's the best part. We don't have to just imagine it. This stele right here gives us the only known image of the Atemenanki ziggurat from that time period. It even shows us the king who rebuilt it, the famous Nebuchadnezzar II, standing proudly next to his masterpiece. This discovery is just a stunning, concrete link between the Bible story and a real building from history.
But who actually built it? Well, tradition usually points to this guy named Nimrod, who Genesis calls a mighty hunter. Over time, other writers started connecting him to the tower, even interpreting his name to mean rebel. But here's the thing modern scholars point out. The Bible itself never actually makes that connection. In fact, chronologically, the tower was likely built long after Nimrod's time. So the identity of the original architect? That remains a pretty cool historical mystery.
Okay, so if the tower was real, what exactly was the crime? Why was this amazing act of unity and engineering seen as such a huge problem that it required divine intervention?
The text gives us a fascinating reason. It says God's concern was that with this kind of unity, quote, nothing that they proposed to do will now be impossible for them. The fear wasn't that people were going to literally break into heaven. No, it was about the scary, unchecked power of human ambition. If they can do this, what's next? The story is basically suggesting that this much power, without any humility, was a very dangerous road to go down.
And it's an idea we're still wrestling with. I saw this comment in a Reddit discussion that kind of puts a modern spin on it. The problem isn't people working together, it's people working together when driven by our own flawed nature. It frames God's intervention as less of a punishment and more of a necessary course correction. A check, just like the user says. So, when you boil it all down, the great crime of Babel really comes down to two things. First, pure disobedience. The builders were deliberately ignoring a divine command to spread out and populate the world. They wanted to concentrate their power, not disperse it. And second, pride.
Their stated goal to make a name for themselves was all about their own glory, not any kind of higher purpose.
And that brings us to the most famous consequence of the whole story: the confusion of languages. What's so wild is that this ancient explanation for why we all speak differently touches on a scientific debate that is very much alive and well today.
So, on one side of this debate, you have a theory called monogenesis. This is the idea that every single language spoken today, from English to Japanese to Swahili, can ultimately be traced back to one single common ancestral language, a kind of proto-world language. It's a fascinating idea that sounds a lot like the world before Babel, right? But then you have the other side, polygenesis. This theory suggests that language didn't just happen once. It suggests that it popped up independently in different places at different times all around the globe. And this view, of course, lines up perfectly with the world after Babel: scattered people, each developing their own unique language. And here you can see the two ideas laid out side by side. Monogenesis is basically the scientific search for the pre-Babel world, that single mother tongue. Polygenesis reflects the reality we see today, a world of incredible linguistic diversity that it argues must have had multiple starting points. It's pretty amazing how this ancient story perfectly captures the tension at the heart of a modern scientific debate.
So where does all this leave us today? The story ends with humanity scattered, unable to understand each other. But if you look around, you have to ask, have we ever really stopped trying to rebuild that tower?
Seriously, think about it. We are constantly building modern Towers of Babel. We're building one with the internet, creating a new kind of universal communication. We're building one with global finance, a single system that connects the entire world's economy. We're building them in space with projects like the International Space Station, proving we can work together on a cosmic level. And now, AI is promising yet another layer of universal understanding. These are all our modern-day towers, built on a foundation of massive, unifying ambition.
And that leaves us with the story's big, lingering question. As we build our own modern towers of technology and global cooperation, are we finally fixing those ancient divisions? Are we finally going to succeed where they failed? Or are we just repeating the same old story of pride and ambition, building higher and higher, just waiting for it all to come crashing down? The Tower of Babel doesn't give us an easy answer.